My name is Anna. I am 36. For years, I believed in the small certainties of my life. The rhythm of school lunches, the weekend trips to the bookshop, the way my husband would brew coffee on Sunday mornings. Those certainties made ordinary things feel like promises. When the promise cracked, it did not break with fanfare. It split slowly, in quiet, practical ways, until the people around me noticed the fissures and gave them names. Today, I will tell you what happened. Not as a judgment, but as a sequence of choices that altered one household and then a courtroom. The marriage began like a pause in a noisy world. Michael was careful with details. The specific angle the lamp should sit, the brand of tea I preferred, the way he remembered birthdays months ahead. He had a patience that felt like safety. We worked our days and folded ourselves back into small domestic returns. Bills, dishes, phone calls from my mother. Our daughter, Sophie, was the center of our arrangement. When she laughed, our house became improbable and warm. That was the life I learned to measure time by. The first sign that something had shifted was paperwork. Small administrative changes that in isolation looked harmless. A new bank card registered under a different email, a subscription to a service that billed irregularly, an unfamiliar name on a delivery docket. A wife notices the rhythms of a home in patterns. Which lights are left on, where receipts stack, what routines are repeated. I noticed, and I asked. He brushed my questions aside with a smile and a pragmatic reason. Work, he said. It's complicated. Complicated, again, as if that neat word could contain the habits that had begun to multiply. Then came secrecy. My husband began to take calls in another room. He scheduled meetings at odd hours. He would log off the family chat and then type again when Sophie was asleep. He changed passwords and left his laptop closed more often. At first, I thought I was being overly suspicious. I had seen paranoia draw false lines before, and I did not want to redraw our life around fear. But caution budded into evidence. Photographs that did not match his stories. A lipstick stain on a collar. A name in a message I did not know. Evidence sharpens questions into decisions. I did not confront him publicly. I did not post accusations or scream in hallways. I began quietly collecting facts. I copied messages into a folder. I printed bank statements and circled unfamiliar transfers. I recorded dates and the times he left the house. There is a discipline to recording the small betrayals. It prevents them from becoming your private theater of rage. I wanted clarity, not performance. I wanted to know what was true. The discovery unfolded with the same quiet cruelty as the secret itself. One evening, I found a folder of photographs on his phone. The faces in the pictures were familiar, his colleagues, neighbors. But there were others. A woman named Claire, smiling in ways that looked intimate. A man named Daniel at a table with them. A restaurant that matched the receipts I hadn't recognized. The photos were not ambiguous. The composition, the intimate proximity, the hushed captions. They read like a life being arranged in parallel. When I asked him, he fumbled and said the words people use when they are embarrassed. It's not what it looks like. Many lies start with that sentence. I made a choice then about what kind of person I wanted to be in the face of betrayal. Some people choose spectacle. Texts posted with sharp captions, friends called in to witness, public confrontations. I chose a methodical path. I spoke to a lawyer. I opened a private bank account. I moved money that belonged to Sophie into a safe place. I taught the child to call a neighbor if she needed anything in the night. All of those acts were gentle and exact. They were practical tools to protect what could be protected. Things escalated when the legal papers arrived. Michael filed for separation first, an odd, sudden motion that sought immediate physical separation during a period when Sophie needed her parents together. I responded with an application of my own to ensure a custody arrangement and to preserve the financial stability of our child. The hearing was scheduled in a month. I prepared, as people prepare for storms, with a list of evidence, with counsel, with a voice that could speak to judges and lawyers without dissolving. Preparation steadies the body. It gives you the courage to stand in a sterile room and tell a private story in the language the law prefers. Sophie was 9 at the time. She had watched the tension thin our afternoons and had seen me pulling back tears in the kitchen after she'd gone to bed. She had her own small register of moments that made no sense to her. The silence after dinner, her father's distracted goodnights, the way photographs rearranged themselves on the mantel. Children collect impressions the way we collect dust. Her impressions were forming a question. The hearing day was bright and ordinary outside. In the small courtroom, the air smelled of old paper and coffee. There were chairs and a bench, a man in a robe who asked for names and addresses, and legal counsel who spoke in precise, measured sentences. The petition read like a domestic earthquake. Michael's lawyer detailed his claims, spoke of irreconcilable differences, suggested that our household had become an uninhabitable place for him. I listened. I kept my voice small but sure. I did what I had rehearsed. I stated facts, cited dates, described routines. The judge nodded, as if following a script. The court was efficient in ways that are rude to sorrow. It wants logic, not outrage. Then Sophie stood. She had told me the night before that she had something to show. I had thought it was a drawing or a school project. I did not imagine, and no one in that room did, that she would be the person who would shift the shape of the hearing with a small device. She walked up, and in a voice that was both frightened and brave, she said, "I want to play something." The judge looked at the attorneys. My lawyer squeezed my hand once and then held his breath. There are moments when the world narrows to the size of a child's voice. Sophie clicked play. The screen lit up. The video began with home footage, candid clips of our lives, a birthday cake being cut, a weekend trip to a river, Sophie falling from a bike and laughing, images that reassured any viewer of a family's ordinary warmth. Then the tone changed. The footage shifted to nights. Michael entering a car with Claire, lingering shots in a hotel lobby, a voice note that seemed to be recorded accidentally and then preserved. The recording was intimate and ordinary, a whisper of a laugh, a conversation about future plans that did not include me. Sophie's decision to include those clips made the domestic into evidence. It made private moments public in a way that was clean and undeniable. As the video played, the room changed. People leaned forward. Michael's face drained. Michael's lawyer protested. He argued for the video's lack of context, for the danger of edited footage. He insisted the clips were a selection, that without the entire conversation, the court could be misled. The technicalities were familiar. In the law, context and chain of custody matter. I expected these objections. Sophie's video had been compiled on her tablet with my knowledge. I had helped her understand how to export files, never thinking that the export would be the thing that mattered in a courtroom. My lawyer responded by presenting the original files, unedited, with timestamps, metadata, and witness statements that corroborated the places and dates. The technical argument failed because the evidence was robust. The metadata matched the claims. The hearing continued in a different energy. Testimony followed. Neighbors corroborated sightings. A delivery driver provided a receipt that matched a timestamp on the transfer. A bank officer testified to the sequence of transfers and to the unusual routing. The judge asked direct questions, and the answers were simple and factual. For someone who had treasured the ordinary structure of life, it was a strange solace to see those ordinary facts assembled into a narrative that enabled action. The law is slow, but it is persistent. After the evidence was admitted, Michael's demeanor shifted. He had expected to defend himself with a practiced ambiguity. Instead, he faced the hard light of documentation. He spoke at one point about regret, about a lapse he wanted to rectify. His voice held the tautness of someone who tried to knit time backwards. He claimed that his actions were not meant to harm Sophie. He promised restitution. There is a way people ask for forgiveness that expects it as a repairable commodity. Forgiveness is not always a transaction. Sometimes it is an unpayable debt. The judge, a weary professional with a kind face, considered the options. Courtrooms have scripts for these moments: emergency custody orders, temporary financial protections for children, supervised contact. He issued an order to freeze certain accounts linked to Sophie's funds and to allow an independent audit of family expenses. He assigned temporary guardianship for certain financial decisions to a neutral trustee. These were not dramatic sentences. They were careful, legal stitches designed to preserve the child's well-being while the rest of the story continued to be told in deposition. In the weeks that followed, the household changed shape. Michael and I navigated lawyers, mediators, and the rhythms of a family rearranged. The legal measures were practical. Accounts were reviewed, assets secured for Sophie's future, and a schedule for visitation was drawn that prioritized emotional safety. There were difficult conversations about trust, and there were grief-stricken moments when we admitted what would not be recoverable. For Sophie, there were counseling sessions where she learned to talk about what she had done and why, and where an adult could translate the complexity of betrayal into language she could hold. Time did something gentle. It smoothed certain edges and left others sharp. Michael and I did not return to the same patterns. He entered therapy. He apologized in ways that were neither dramatized nor performative. I learned how to set boundaries that were not punitive, and how to recognize the small practices that create safety. Shared calendars, open financial statements, scheduled check-ins. Not all relationships recover, but in recovery, there can be rebuilding that does not rely on forgetfulness, but on new practice. For Sophie, the world became a place where truth-telling had consequences, but where honesty also generated protection. People asked me afterward if I regretted letting Sophie present the video. Some thought it cruel to expose private life in a courtroom. Others praised her courage. My response was practical. Children must be protected, and in this case, the video gave the court a way to do so. In another world, a private conversation or a private agreement might have sufficed. In our reality, documentation made action possible. The video was not revenge. It was a tool, an uncomfortable one, necessary for the work of safeguarding a child's future. There are lessons in this story that are not tidy. I learned that small administrative facts, bank timestamps, photographs, delivery receipts, can hold the same moral force as a confession. I learned that children are not blind to the dynamics of adults, and that their interventions can be wise and risky. I learned that the law can be a resource for dignity when used thoughtfully, and that the quiet work of preparation often outperforms loud spectacle. If you are listening and carrying a private suspicion, know this: you have options that are not only about confrontation. You can collect facts, seek counsel, protect your child's resources, and plan actions that do not rely on theatricality. Truth matters, but so does how you present it. The smallest acts of care, opening a separate account, making a record of receipts, encouraging your child to speak to a counselor, are strategies that protect you from chaos. Months later, in a small moment that felt like reconciliation without romance, Sophie and I planted a small herb garden on our balcony. The basil and mint are ordinary things, but they smell like a new routine. We water them together. They grow with patience and insistence. Sometimes I look at those plants and think of the courtroom, and the child who carried a video like a compass. I think of the small certainties I still cherish. The way she reads under a blanket with a flashlight. The neighbor who brings over soup when the weather is bad. The moments when a family looks ordinary again, because it is being tended. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Share it with someone who might need the quiet courage to gather facts and protect what matters. And remember, in the slow work of repair, dignity is often the outcome of careful, deliberate steps, rather than of dramatic gestures. I am Anna. In that courtroom, my daughter played a video. The truth was plain. We used it not to punish, but to protect. And from that protection, a new life, imperfect, honest, and carefully tended, began.